energy future. And we'll be moving forward in the agenda to the next panel, which is on Nigeria's energy transition plan, betting on gas as a transition fuel. Betting on gas as a transition fuel. We're just going to allow those who are outside, please let them, those who are outside, come in. If we know anyone outside, let them come in. I know we've been having this conversation since morning, right? And we've been talking energy transition, but I'm just going to go to a couple of tables and ask maybe one thing that we have picked from the conversation today. It could be something we picked from the keynote speaker. It could be something we picked from the goodwill. It could be something we picked from the fireside chat. So I'll first start with this table, but I'm not going to give the goodwill. I'm not going to give thank you, George Coley. Something you have picked from today's conversation. So just give us one.
Plenty, lot of things, but good afternoon. One of the things that I learned in this
Please let's listen.
is about the budgeting regarding the distribution of the budgeting in the energy sector that has been taught about, how government is funding and how the large sum of money goes to agriculture, ministry that has to do with energy sector, which is, of course, is something that we have to look at and see where we needed money, the money is channeled to that particular sector, not the other way around, because that is one key thing that struck my mind. How can huge sum of money go to agriculture that is meant for energy, renewable energy sector? That is.
Okay, so channeling the monies where they belong and where they can be most useful. Let me ask one more table. There's a table at the back that has so many people, and they all look so interesting. Okay, please, anybody here, one thing you've learned from today's conversation. You just look like, okay. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
One thing that struck me in the conversation today is that more allocations for mitigations are being given by that's the REA, Rural Electrification Agency, has the largest allocation in terms of mitigation. And it was truly a surprise for me. And also that more allocations are being given towards erosion and flooding in the budget. And if more allocations are being given, even in Abuja, you were asking, where's the result?
Okay. So learning that there are some of these allocations, but we're not seeing it interpret into results. I think I'll ask this table, what are you hoping the next conversation to look like? Or what are you hoping to gain from the next conversation? Anybody? Or is anonymous? Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe a brief hint into the next conversations, which revolve around how we're using gas as like a transition fuel. So that would be interesting conversations.
All right, thank you very much. Please let's put our hands together for ourselves. Our clap is very cold, though. It means we're not proud of ourselves. All right, so we're going into the next panel session, and moderating this panel session is the lead Natural Resource and Climate Governance Budget Foundation, Enebi Opalua. Please put your hands together for him. And on this, And on this panel, he will be joined by the country manager, Natural Resource Governance Institute, Tengi George Okoli. Please let's clap. Please let's clap. We also have Chinedu E. Igwe, Head of Sustainability, NNPCL. Please, let's keep clapping. Let's not be tired to jam our hands, please. Joining us online is Engineer Faith Nwadishi, Executive Director, Center for Transparency Advocacy. Please, can we have her connected online? And then lastly, we have Mohammed Kamaldeen from NEC. Do we have? Oh, and you answered so well. Thank you very much. All right. So over to you, Enebi.
Thank you very much, Damilola. Mohammed Damal Kamal is from the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Just felt I should state that. All right, thank you very much. Okay, yes, we have Madam Faith online. Madam Faith, can you hear us? If you, Engineer Faith, can you hear us? Confirm.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
All right, thank you very much for joining us. She tried everything she could to every way she can to be here, but it's Nigeria. Let me just leave it at that. All right, she is also a member of the board of the RGN representing the North Central region. So this is very, very apt. And she's, if you know Engineer Faith Wani, she has worked in the extractive sector. She's one of our pioneering, and the people, when they say we stand on your shoulders, she serves that purpose. Also, I want to thank, welcome again to the NPCL, NEC, for joining us on this conversation. I think there is no how we can have meaningful conversations around gas expansion or gas usage in Nigeria and decarbonization without having critical voices in the room. Also with us is Tengi Georgie Kole, the country manager of the NRGI, who has done intensive work for several years. I think, how many decades now has the experience covered? All right, so we'll get straight into it. So just a few words. Nigeria is going through a transition process. And part of that process includes increased use of gas as a bridge fuel. There are several headwinds that happen, that is currently going on across the world, that in some cases you might say some elements favor the use of gas. And on the other hand, you might say elements do not favor the use of gas. And basically, whether it favors or not, the idea is what is the best context for Nigeria and how do we balance the, okay, my audio, sorry. So how do we balance the utilization of, or how do we balance Nigeria's transition plan in a way that decarbonization is well situated within our ambitions as a country? And at the same time, how do we put elements in place that ensures we are not locked in for another cycle, but the resources we have today are effectively utilized to diversify the economy or to create more opportunities, let me put it that way. So I hope I was able to balance the framing. If not, please forgive me. But we are going to go straight into the panel. Let me start with thank you first. All right. Exactly. You read my mind. All right. So, sorry, just give me a minute. All right. So Nigeria has a decade of gas initiative with plans to scale gas across power industry and cooking and transport sectors to serve its domestic energy needs as well as increase export revenue. Now, from your analysis and your work in the sector, prior attempts to do this, basically we've tried to scale up gas usage. This is not our first attempt. Based on your experience on Nigeria's history with that, what are Nigeria's prospects given the current financial, let's say, temperature? And then put it that way.
Okay, thanks so much for that question. And thanks again, everyone, for your rapt attention. I think you sort of said it in your question. For Nigeria, again, Nigeria has designed a transition landscape for itself. It's keyed into the global climate commitments, transition away from fossil fuels into a low carbon energy future. And that's part of what this conversation is about today. But the challenge that we've seen, and one of the, if you've all received cards, one of the QR codes will lead you to some of the analysis that we've done. And essentially, we're reflecting on a Nigeria that has explored expansion of its gas for many, many years. Typically, you would hear Nigeria say, people say that Nigeria is a gas country with a side business in oil, but somehow that main business has not yet manifested, right? And so you ask the question, why is that the case, right? What really has happened? The Nigeria has had its national gas policy, it's had a gas master plan, and numerous other expansion plans, but it hasn't been able to yield sort of results that it expects to yield. And then within that context, we've seen a shift away from fossil fuels. So naturally, the context has changed. The question that you then ask is, how far has Nigeria recalibrated based on this context? Has it done so? And then that takes us now to Nigeria's, leveraging as a transition fuel, and then Decade of Gas initiative that underpins that, which is meant to drive expansion from 2021 to 2030. And then, determine what the future might be for Nigeria beyond that. We don't know, but that's certainly where Nigeria currently stands, right? Nigeria articulated a series of 20 projects that it wanted to use to advance and expand its gas. But then that calls to mind other things that we had in the past, 7 gas power projects and many other slogans that we've had in the past. But concretely, how much more gas can Nigeria get in terms of its upstream? So that's the first part of the conversation, if it wants to expand. And from analysis, only about a third of that ambition can be realized. And the reason for that is investments are shrinking, they're taking different forms over many decades. There's, international organizations, DFIs, etc., are now tending more towards what a low carbon energy future might look like. They're focusing on ESG, compliant investments and what that could look like. And so the question is, how much essentially has Nigeria right size, right? How have we recalibrated based on this new context? The NNPC earlier this year, I believe, MNPCL, put out a NNPC gas master plan, which essentially reimagined, reshaped the gas master plan that preceded it in 2008. Right, we have very, very laudable ambitions that we have in policies and documents, but then it's always about how do we recalibrate for what can actually be achieved in real time. So that's the question that we sort of seek to ask. We have domestic ambitions for gas, for power, for industry, for all these different areas. But as I've said in our analysis, we're unable to sort of meet those ideas, right? These ambitions. So what we're proposing is Nigeria sort of right-sizing that ambition and looking at the available opportunities that you have with renewables or actually other sectors. Right now, our non-oil sectors are quite buoyant. So how are we recalibrating? How are we getting the budget of national planning to be part of that conversation, petroleum resources, etc., to try to really show and demonstrate for Nigerians, right, what have we learned in the past with our gas master plans and policies that didn't work or achieve that sort of goal in the past? If we even look at our power sector, gas has sort of underpinned that sector for many years, but we've not been able to realize the kind of power that we want to see, right? Over the last decade, it would not surprise us to think that at least we've had about over 200 supply shortages or power shortages. But what are we actually doing to reimagine what a future could look like across all these different industries, right? Power is just one example. So that's what we're proposing is for Nigeria that is not where it was in the past, right? I mean, we're part of those organizations in the past that we're sort of looking at and saying, how is Nigeria actually using and optimizing its oil and gas? It didn't do so in the time when the context was not sort of tilted towards a shift away from fossil fuels, de-investing in fossil fuels, etc. So it's about what the future could potentially look like. How do we reframe this future? How do we ensure that ultimately the goal that Nigeria wants to achieve is energy, right? We all want to see power, we want to see industries thrive, but it's about making sure that we get the right sort of mix in place and not really committing to one energy source and constantly recalibrating to see what's possible, and then aligning with the commitments that we have made ourselves. And if the data that we have leveraged to design these commitments or policies, we also need to review them, right? I just make this last point. We had a session. I had a session with different partners some weeks ago, and so they were refuting the insights in Nigeria's policy instruments. And so it was like, basically, we need to start from a place of honesty and trust in Nigeria's plans. And if those plans are outdated or not reflective of what's on the ground, we need to change them. But then we don't do that, and then you have citizens, arguing based on what they know or don't know. So we don't even to begin with. We don't even imagine or expect to trust our own plans, which is wrong, because that is where the NERCs, the REAs, the NNPCLs, everyone takes their mandates. And if the baseline is faulty, we have to make sure that we fix that, and then everything else that comes from that can then be more realistic, more pragmatic, and then we can trust that we're all moving in one direction, right? And again, as a last point, the slides that NAB showed earlier on as well had us, tending financing towards agriculture for solar, more so in a way that's not reflective of what Nigerians imagine it should be. So we need to start from a place of getting our foundations right, or being all aligned in what that looks like. And that for gas should be about right sizing our ambitions to make them more realistic and putting in place other sectors that can raise raise financing and economic growth for us. And then other sectors can also deliver the energy future that we want to see. Thank you.
Please, a round of applause for Tengi again. All right. So I'm sure you all know I'm going to end up at Chinedu's doorstep next. And at this point now, I don't think I need to ask any question. Tengi has kind of asked a lot of questions in her response. So basically, I'll just allow you to respond. But in doing so, let me just rephrase all of this. So, like you said, NPCL has its gas master plan this year. Perhaps, okay, let me ask it this way. There are some things she said that you probably agree with, and perhaps some things that you may not agree with. So, in what ways does your sustainability plan? Because I know that NPCL has a sustainability policy, and they also have a gas policy. So, in what ways do your policies in the NPCL consider what she has said? Because she mentioned a lot of recalibrating. In what ways do you do they consider that? And perhaps there are certain insights that the NPCL has seen that makes it bank well to use bank on gas. I don't know if you get my question. So maybe just weave that into your response to all the issues that Tengi raised.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think with regards to the understanding of gas, I would like to start from Tengi's point around Nigeria being a gas-rich country, right? And then, like you said, oil as a side hustle. I like that word. We know that we are really rich in gas, and we know that generally gas has been treated as a supporting fuel to oil in most facilities, right? So because most investors come in and start exploration for oil, and then gas usually is incidental to oil. So we've transitioned from that point where we had what you call the associated gas to now the non-associated gas. So in those non-associated gas, investments become critical, because investors will want to be sure that there's a cash flow, right, for them. So they want to make an investment, capital investments, and be able to recover their investment plus, a profit, because they're there for a margin. So when you look at the journey for Nigerian gas, and those are the things that led to a lot of the policies, regulations, laws that you've seen, developed in the country, from the associated gas framework, non-associated gas framework. Then we moved into the gas master plan conversation, which was a national gas master plan. And those gas master plan conversations looked at things like policies that needed to be in place, gas aggregation systems that needed to be placed, gas pricing for that recognize different sectors of the industry, and that also had the sector reflective prices that would also act as an enabler, to developing the sector, developing the gas industry, enabling the domestic sector, while at the same time staying competitive, for investors, foreign investors to come in and put their money. And I mean, we've also looked at things around like gas hubs and all that, that needed to be done. And we've transited from there to look at things like the seven critical gas development projects, which the aim, was to really see how we can accelerate these gas projects and bring gas to the fore. And with the decade of gas, so there are quite a lot of projects. Now, coming into the modern times now, recent times, we're all aware of the Petroleum Industry Acts, right, that changed the industry landscape, where you now have the NUPRC, NMDPRA. You also have NMPC transiting from being a corporation of the government, right, playing the role of a policymaker in quotes, and also playing the role general of a corporation of governments. Now moving into a company that is saddled with a mandate to be commercially viable and make profits, right? So it then means that if we had a gas master plan that imposed a gas master plan, then, right? So it was very important to begin to review that gas master plan to see then what would NMPC's role be. And that's why in this year we launched our own NMPC gas master plan. I put that emphasis on NMPC, right? So we're not doing a national gas master plan as we did before, right? Our focus now is what will NMPC now do? And NMPC is crafting that from the point of all the achievements all the policies that have now been put in place in the industry, the pricing framework that's been done in the industry, the gas transportation framework that's been done in the industry, and is now asking, how will NMPC achieve its objectives? So key objectives for NMPC really, we have a target, a mandate from Mr. President that says by 2030, I want you to hit 12 BCF of gas production. Currently, we're around the 7.5 BCF of gas produced, right? So how do we then move from that 7.5 BCF to a 10 BCF in 2027, which is knocking around the corner, right? And then a 12 BCF. And it was in order to address this question to say, what are the challenges? How do we ensure there's a coordinated response to addressing this gap? And that was what led to that gas master plan. So currently we have a desk, the gas master plan desk in NMPC. What it does then is to look at the upstream side, the midstream and the downstream and the whole market side, and see how do we integrate them, stress test the projects so that projects are aligned, with upstream projects aligned with the midstream and then downstream, right? Because you mentioned something around power. We could have cases where you site a power plant and then there's no gas going to that power plant. So people could run projects, right? Because during the ACFA, that's Associated Gas Framework, you could have the upstream being incentivized by doing projects, because then you had what you call so the tax mechanism then was more encouraging towards investments, not actually towards production. So the more money you spend as an upstream investor, the more you get your tax benefits, right? So a lot of upstream guys would really focus on pushing for investment. But how does that investment, right, address national issues? How does that drive, national development? Those are the key conversations that the gas master plan then begins to address, and thankfully the PIA has set that framework, that bedrock from which we can then take a leap from. So now the gas master plan is stress testing to ensure that all of these projects are aligned. So I think one of the key things that we really need to look at then are the support also from Mr. President, things around the recent deep offshore incentives that were granted, the Executive Order 9. These are things also helping the industry. Now, when it comes then for how we are now supporting the fossil fuel conversation, right? So in all for NMPC sustainability, gas is a transition fuel. Remember that we are set up by the Petroleum Industry Act. We're not set up by the Energy Acts of Nigeria, right? So we have our business cut out for us, and that business is produce petroleum. Now it says also part of that provision in the Petroleum Industry Act says, yes, you can make investments in renewables, right? But that's not our mandate. If you also look at that, you see responsibilities of the Ministry of Petroleum in those things. Then you see upstream regulatory commission, midstream and downstream petroleum regulation. These are all petroleum conversations which NMPC is saddled on. So NMPC's role is not what's it called, the renewables, right? NNPC's role is for the country is to ensure petroleum. However, we are aware of changing narratives, right? And because we want to be sustainable for business, we want to ensure energy affordability, we want to ensure energy security, right? And also ensure environmental sustainability. So for NNPC, then it is not then producing as business as usual, but also producing in a way that our barrels would find the markets, in a way that is clean for operations, in a way that is safe to those who are operating on our assets. So these are key conversations which NNPC, through its sustainability framework and sustainability target, is aspiring, to achieve. And it is not that it's new for us to do these things, right? Because if you take a look at whether Petroleum Act, Petroleum Industry Act, the key words there are reasonable and prudent operator. So the oil and gas industries are at every point in time very conscious and aware of the impact of their operations on the environment, right? I mean, because even if you're not mindful of it, your staff gets exposed. We've heard of things like blowouts that has happened, affected, killed lots of people who are working. So the oil and gas industry is an industry that has to be responsible for itself, right? To also ensure safety and continuous operation. Now we're also considerate about the environment, so that we also constantly secure our our social license to operate. So our sustainability plan is framed then to ensure that NNPC builds that resilience that addresses the market needs while ensuring that we produce and deliver to the market clean petrol, right? I use the word clean petrol, yeah, but I would not say that our business is set to give you renewables. We have a renewable unit, but that's not our business. That's just a side hustle for us, really, right? so, I think those are the key things just to respond to some of the points that she has raised.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive response. Hold the mic first, because sorry, I will go to next. But before I continue, please, we also have other government agencies in the room. Ministry of Petroleum, I think there are representatives of the NMDPRA. So please feel free to contribute. After we have this round, I will open it up to the audience. So if you want to add anything to the conversation, please do so. We also have CSOs that are vast in this area. So please put your contributions and your questions down. We are coming to the audience very, very soon. So quick follow-up. All right. Two things. You mentioned cash flow. And basically, you have to ensure that the cash flow is there, at least given the current narratives. Now, my question is simple. Is this cash flow, is the NPC really seeing it? That is one. And let me tie it to the next question, which is the NPC has a target to hit 12 PCF by 2030. Currently, we are around 7 or 7.5. Okay, good. Now, would that be from existing assets, or the NPC needs to get additional assets to hit that target? I'm asking because if we need to get additional assets to hit that target, then the issue of cash flow and financing for these additional investments now becomes very critical. So, is it existing assets or additional assets, and is the cash feasible?
Okay, thanks. So it's a very interesting question, and why I say that is that it gives opportunity to respond to what we are doing with existing assets, because those existing assets are your immediate cash flow, right? Because they are your brownfield, right? Where you can quickly make either you need to improve on the asset integrity or put in facilities so that you can produce more of those gas facilities. I mean, flare conversations are there. How do you utilize flares, right? So when you talk about the production of that's domestic sales of 7.5 right now, produced sales gas of 7.5. Part of what you have gas that's being reinjected, you have gas that's being flared. So how do we address some of these concerns? Can I improve on my rejection, my recovery mechanism? Can I address the flare concerns? This would at least boost some of the gas volumes that are then produced for the markets, right? Then under current assets, are there other ways, brownfield assets, are there other ways we can incentivize, for those assets to be produced? And that's why this executive order 9 help comes into support. And then the recent project by the Mr. President, where he looks at, okay, how can we then carry out new projects that would support the development of Nigerian assets? Now, when it comes to new fields, we've done lots of assessment as a company, and there are fields today that have ready to go gas. Okay, but what it just needs is what are those clear commercial terms that would make investors put down their money on those assets, right? And some of these are commercial conversations that needs to happen to unlock. I know it's also a willingness of both sides, right? Both the partners, also the partners of the venture and NMPC, right? Because partners of the ventures have, especially the IOCs, they have a ranking of the investments. They could look at different countries and say, based on this gives me the most return. This is the one I've scaled to do for this year. So, but what we're trying to do then, through NMPC is to see how we can mature those conversations and reduce those volumes. I mean, there are quite a lot that's just been tied in together, right? Like I said, it's not just about the upstream conversation, but it's also how we are stress testing that the upstream projects are properly lined up with the midstream facility that will take those gas, right? So, and the one key project that we all could be aware of is the AKK project, right? Because when you talk about gas production, gas is not like oil. So it's not about going to unlock the gas resource in the ground. You need to make sure that the gas has a home where it's going to. So even if you're using LNG for it, or if you're using CNG, right? What's the transfer point, for those gas assets? So if it were like oil, we could say, oh, just go produce. But the key things for gas is how you line up, the midstream and the downstream. When I say midstream here, like a gas processing facility, right? And then the downstream that will take those gas facilities. So these are very critical conversations. So beyond the upstream assets, whether it's a new or old conversation, it is how ready is the supporting, that's the value chain, right, to offtake the gas volumes and take them to the market. 27 is a project still in progress, right? We just crossed river crossing for the AKK, right? And I mean, these are projects that we just need to line up and have the upstream ready to give that. But upstream parts, yes, we've got some good commercial close, but these downstream facilities need to be in place.
All right, thank you. Let me move to NERC. I'm sure whatever questions I have, the audience will ask them. And I think
I hope it's
is also
not
easy
bandy.
to follow up.
I hope it's not
No,
bandy.
I was even talking about Chinedu.
Okay.
But for those of you who want to know about your tariff, don't that is not, I don't think that is why he's here today. So it's not whether you have your units in your meter for now. Maybe you can see him on the sidelines and discuss that with him. Well, if he wants to comment on that, it's up to him. All right. So, yes, I think this is the perfect follow-up to your question, because the electricity industry is one of the biggest proposed consumers for Nigeria's gas plan. All right. And as a regulator, I think my question is, how well is Nigeria's electricity supply industry positioned to support the complementarity of gas and renewables for sustainable energy supply? So yes, and the electricity sector has both the gas-fired component and then the renewable energy component, and then upscaling. All right. In fact, as of today, if you factor in hydro, we are over 20% in terms of installed capacity, if I'm correct, or around that 20%. By the time you factor in increasing solar capacity, we have a target to hit 30% or 40% by 2030. So how well is the Nigerian electricity industry positioned to support the complementarity of gas in this conversation? All right.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to take the questions in two parts. So you spoke to how ready we are in terms of compatibility between having renewables as well as, the gas that we have that is in abundance. And the second part then has to do with what are we doing with regards to maybe hitting the targets, which is the energy mix targets. That's what you're trying to say, of 30% of our energy mix being from renewable sources. Okay, so with regards to the first part, when we say to see how we can merge renewable energy with abundant gas supply or thermal plants that we have in the sector. What we're trying to see is, okay, in terms of marginal costs, how best are you placed with regards to, okay, saying renewable energy sources, typically solar, which are intermittent in supply, how can you then merge that with your gas? again, it's been overflogged with regards to saying that gas for Nigeria is a transition fuel. It's not something whereby we're just looking strictly at maybe renewables alone for our transition. We are a country that has been overflogged to say, okay, we have abundant gas, we have it in excess, we need to be able to utilize what we have, and not necessarily go with what the saying is. Tengi also made mention about how changing and evolving policies need to be adopted in order for us to reach, our energy targets and energy access requirements, right? So, with regards to bringing in renewables, in particular, I want to stick with solar. Yes, it's said that current energy mixes, we have about 20-25% of our energy mix being from renewable sources, which is hydros now. Obviously, it depends on whichever season that you're in, if you're in the flood seasons or you're in the dry seasons, right? So, but with what we found recently with renewables, that is solar in particular, is that we are having a situation whereby daylight solar, which is the most competitive, being priced at around 6 cents per kilowatt hours. That is dirt cheap compared to where we're coming from, whereby if you remember in 2014 we had situations whereby there were 14 solar projects that were trying to connect to the grid, but at the time I think the tariffs in conversation then was around, I think, 11 cents. So you can see there's been a significant drop from there. So you look at daylight solar of about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and then you're in a situation whereby you're trying to merge that intermittency with a proven gas thermal power base that tariffs hover on average of about 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So therein immediately you see where the opportunity lies. The opportunity lies in the ability to then take during the peak solar irradiation periods of the day, whereby you can then push your solars through and through, and then you can then have your renewables, that's the hydro side, as well as the thermals, to then carry on probably during the peak hours of the day, whereby, the peak hours of the day that we have is between 6 p.m., 9 p.m. on average, as well as early in the mornings when we're getting ready for work and all of that. So the idea in terms of for them to be able to complement is whereby we are then using we're trying to see how we can then use cheaper solar standalones, just as solar without the battery solutions during the day, and then during the peak times you can then bring in your hydro and then your peaking plants in terms of the thermals. Then in terms of Nigeria being, so again, Nigeria is strategically positioned to be able to harness these opportunities. But however, in terms of the NESI in itself, we're not quite there yet. In terms of, we still have regulatory frameworks that we need to improve. We need to try to see how private participation can also be increased in the sector. With regards to the complementarity that you spoke about as well, we can say, okay, we want to add more power, more capacity, but without a proper value chain in terms of the other segments of the electricity market, transmission, that's me speaking to transmission and distribution, significant investment still needs to go into those segments. So yes, investment in both in infrastructure. Okay, yes, I think I already touched base on the shifting directions that need to be considered. Then the second part of your question that then spoke about what are we doing with regards to meeting our yes, the 30% mix that we want for renewables. So if you are familiar with NERC, we release a monthly order in which it's mandated for distribution companies to set up targets or to set up embedded generation within their network. So what that also helps with, it helps with localizing some of the renewables, and that way everything doesn't always have to feed back onto the grid. It's localized so that whatever, and insulated from happenings that happen on the grid. We've heard situations of multiple grid collapses and what have you, but so we've set mandates and targets for them to have at least 50% of that 30% renewable target as embedded in their network. So that just helps strengthen the network further. So I think I'll leave it at that for now.
All right. Thank you very much. So I have please ask. I have a question, and it's for Chinedu and Kamal. Yes. Yeah. Before I go to Madam Faith, you don't have to answer now. Just I will come back later so you answer it. Now, for me, the issue of gas is a question of time. For me, yes, we have a mandate as a country to utilize the abundant resources we have. That makes practical sense. Use low-hanging fruits. But there's an issue of time. Do the current global and local conditions does that give us enough time to make these investments and still make profit? You mentioned the multiple grid collapses. That tells us the state of our grid. We have energy rejection, gas rejection. So is the NESI in a position to absorb increased energy deployment from increased gas generation? Or in fact, before we even get there, if those investments come, do we have, because these are long-term investments, we're looking 10, 20, 30 years. And given the trend, the outlook, though may be mixed, but in the long term, it tilts towards renewables and decreasing investments for fossil fuels. So the question is, do we have at this time, are we well positioned to make those investments now and still not carry gbese on our head as a country? I think that is the question I'm asking for me. So keep that in mind. I will come back and writing down your answers. That's very good. Let me go to Madam Faith. So, Engineer Faith, you are very experienced in the Nigerian, let's say, energy sector, oil and gas producing communities as well. Let me say, okay, Nigeria's plans is designed to increase gas production and utilization, all right, both domestically and internationally for export and for revenue generation. This would have impacts on the environment, health-wise, local communities and livelihoods. Now, what do you think should be the most important issue to be addressed when it comes to Nigeria's gas ambitions? Now, you have experience with community engagements and you have seen firsthand how fossil fuel generation, oil and gas production has impacted local communities. Now, within that context, what do you think needs to be addressed in Nigeria's gas expansion plans? And let me just add that quickly for time. Another question is one of the ways the government wants to address gas flaring is the Nigeria Gas Play Commercialization Program, and it's also part of Nigeria's gas expansion plans. Do you think this can help mitigate gas flaring and methane emissions in Nigeria? And are we on track to meet the zero flare by 2030? So those two questions, if you can address them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anebi. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, everyone, and interesting conversations that we have been having. And I really like the response from the NNPC representative that we have there. But for me, I think the most important issue we need to address in looking at Nigeria gas expansion is the question about ensuring that our expansion plans does not reproduce the environmental we had during the oil era, the injustice that we had, where communities, livelihoods were already taken off. And we're still living with the realities of what is happening in River State, in Bile community, where the people don't even have access to, children don't even have access to schools. So it's important. I agree with all members of the panelists who have said that gas would help our energy transition, is our energy transition plan. It will help our electricity and all of those. So I support that argument completely. But again, we need to look at what cost, at what cost are we expanding our gas? Does gas expansion, does it equate to energy transition? Because the way we are looking at gas expansion in Nigeria, we are just looking at, addressing the issues of flares, addressing the issues of carbon dioxide, emission, but we're not looking at the greater impact of methane emission and all of that. For instance, perhaps the NNPC representative can throw more light on the just there was this contract that was signed for floating LNG, with the UTM offshore, the three investment up to $3 billion. So the question will be, with that kind of investment in that sector, how will Nigerians benefit from it? What will be the benefit to Nigerians? Because we're looking at saying, okay, let us expand our gas, let us get more gas. But you see, that contract that was signed in July does not address the issue of gas flares because it goes offshore. It does not address, now in trying to make sure that you are not investing money in infrastructure, you are going to now have a floating LNG that takes away the issue of infrastructure. So the question would be that, what does that $3 billion, what does it mean for investment for the ordinary Nigerians? How much additional domestic energy will it provide? How many sustainable Nigerian jobs will it create? How many Nigerian businesses will participate in its supply chain? And how will host communities benefit? So it is not about just having foreign direct investment or saying that we want to expand our gas capture utilization, but we need to ask the critical question about how it impacts on the environment and on society. And so your question for me will be, most importantly, the issue to address in that expansion is, how do we ensure that we are not repeating the cycle of injustice that we have seen with the production of crude oil and that. And also, how are we addressing the issue of methane emission? Because it's not just about carbon dioxide. We have seen scientific data that shows that even methane emissions are much more than that. So, for instance, the Nigeria 2023 gas flaring, venting, and methane emission regulations are therefore important because they address venting and fugitive methane emissions. It shouldn't be only on paper, it should be also implemented. And in that conversation around that contract that is signed with UTME for the floating liquefied natural gas, which is one of the ways that they have done that, we need to be able to address the issues of environmental injustice. And quickly, to go to your second question about, are we on track to achieving the 2030? I would say that since 1969, Nigeria has always shifted the goalposts. And I was privileged to have been at the launch of the routine gas flare, ending routine gas flare in Washington, D.C. in 2015. It is 10 years after, and yet we are still not really on ground. The Nigerian flare control, the realistic program that we have seen so far, government together to ensurize our gas, capture our gas, and use it for the programs. For instance, data shows that about 49 flare sites were awarded to 42 successful bidders. To assess flare gas have subsequently been issued to participating company. But what I would emphasize is this: permits do not reduce emission. Awards do not reduce emission. Capturing emission. So we're not just giving out licenses to people who will capture gas, but we're following up to ensure that what we have in our policies and the implementation helps to reduce, for instance, methane and address issues of environmental pollution in our communities. For instance, the Nigerian gas flare commercialization problem does not solve the entire methane problem. And if you go to NUPRC and what they have talked about, most times when we talk about issues of gas, we do not address the issue of methane emission. We're only looking at it from the point of view of reducing flares, of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, but without looking at the issues around the venting and methane. For instance, methane can leak from compressors. Methane from pipeline gas can also be vented. So flare out and methane reduction are related, but they are not the same thing. So when we are making the plans for implementing reduction of gas flares and capturing our gas, we need to also be intentional about reducing those methane flares. So for me, if you ask me directly, is 2030 achievable? It is achievable to the extent that we begin to walk the talk. We have talked for too long. We have shifted the goalposts for too long. Imagine from 1969, there is even a subsisting law in the High Court in Benin City to end gas flares and ensure criminalize gas flare, and yet we have not been able to implement that. So what we really need to do is to ensure that 2030 is still within our focus. We have made commitments. Nigeria is one of those countries that have made commitments. NNPC is one of those countries, CEPLAT, and I'm happy that NNPC and CEPLAT are collaborating on the UTM offshore floating liquefied natural gas project. But the people itself, the people themselves, the community people must be part of that conversation, so that they, at the end of the day, what we are doing with our gas expansion is like carrying it out as a social corporate responsibility. It shouldn't be a social corporate responsibility. When you go to a community, you are extracting gas, or you're going there to give them the health education, environmental education, and sometimes we describe those things as corporate social responsibility. They shouldn't be corporate social responsibility. They should be part of the implementation, from the design of such projects, so that community people can be part of the decision making, are part of entrepreneurs, and not just as beneficiaries, but also as contributors to the entire value chain. So in a nutshell, we just end here and say two fundamental things that we must address in our gas expansion: ensure that our gas expansion is not repetition of what we have had with the oil and gas, the oil extraction in the past, and addressing the injustice, and of course ensuring that methane emission is key and central in whatever conversations we are having in our gas expansion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You always feel the energy from Engineer Faith, man. She always gives it at that level. So, well, the NUPRC has said they will not shift the goalpost this time. They are committed to that deadline. So, let's hold them to their word. As she mentioned a few things. I don't know if you want to respond to them now, but anybody from the audience, contributions, questions, you just raise your hands now. Let me see. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, because of mic distance, let's start from here. 1, 2, 3. Before, do you want to respond to anything she said? Okay, take everything together. All right. Right. So, lady in front, gentleman in yellow at the back, number 2, and the other gentleman at the back, number 3. All right. If you don't raise your hand now, you cannot raise your hand later. Don't get inspiration from the question. All right. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. I have been enjoying the panel conversation. It's quite technical and also very interesting. So just like the Mr. Chinedu mentioned, there are a number of gas-related projects, and just like Matenge mentioned, when it comes to gas infrastructure, that's an area where the country is lacking or lagging. And just like Mafet mentioned, there's a concern for community inclusivity. So my question is, how exactly do we consolidate with the need to build actual gas infrastructures while phasing down the emission? The second one I want to ask is regarding the downstream. So anyone familiar with the IOCs know that the downstream, it takes a while to break even in the downstream, particularly when we are speaking about the distribution, and a number of the stations that have CNG distribution centers, they also cater to PMS, for instance. So my question is, does the profitability of the downstream sector play a key role in affecting the pace at which we are transiting? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's take all the questions. Right, number 2, the gentleman in yellow towards your right by the wall at the back. Please, you can just stand so she can quickly see you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Warrison Boraf people, I work with Center for Empowerment and Advocacy. I equally join to add my voice to the panel discussion. It has been quite impactful, insightful too. My question is to the man from NNPC. I like the way you narrowed it down to not being a Nigerian project per se, but NNPC midwifing and the brainchild of NNPC. But my question and concern is the way we had when NNPC did from NNPCL to NNPC to NNPCL. That was a similar conversation we had that, a lot of things have changed. This is going to be Nigerian project and we are now stakeholders. But the more you look, the less you see. Nothing really changed. So at this time now, what I see is nomenclature. Just let's remove L from this side and put it this side and they will believe. So what are the strategic plans you have to deliver in these things you have said? And again, the sustainability component. We find out that no idea lasts more than 5 years. When your administration goes now, another one will hear different English. So what do you think you have on ground to actually follow through and let this one at least beyond 2030, and we'll come back here, we'll say, yes, you said it, and we can pin it to. Then there is a conversation we have been having. We say like NNPC, like INEC, they have too much to do, so let's unbundle NNPC because it's too much, we don't even know where to pin them down again. So what's your position in, let us, this behemoth called NPC, let us unbundle it and give responsibility to others so we can pin people to their task. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Right. The final question. Yes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dede, and I'm an energy transition analyst. Before I go to my questions, I have taken a few notes. Thank you, esteemed panelists. So one of the things I made notes on was the just transition in terms of gas expansion. And I was very happy or delighted to hear when someone mentioned, NNPC, moving towards its own, program. But one thing I wanted to ask, because, during one of my research, I, was looking into what other countries who are, have gas, what have they done in terms of even sovereign wealth when you think of livelihoods. I can't remember the country right now. I think it was Denmark or Germany. They have the individuals, each person has about probably over $300,000. While Nigeria, when we think of our sovereign wealth, we have like $15, but then moving away from that, right? I'll try to not put the mic too close.
Shift a bit, just shift. Okay. Yes.
So moving away from that, my next question would be, how does it, like the question said, everyday citizens, how do we put them in the framework? Because gas is not cheap. When you think of rural communities, we think of clean cooking, we think of women affected by, fossil fuels. The reality is, the reason why these communities still use, firewoods, a lot of livelihoods are attached to that. Communities still go there, is because they cannot afford it. The ordinary people cannot afford to buy gas. Yes, it's very lovely that we are here discussing all of these things, but then in these frameworks, how do we include, you know, everyday people into making sure that gas is affordable for them? And then, okay,
Maybe you
come
should come
forward.
forward, yeah.
Okay. All right. So my next question would be, now that we have this policy, in terms of gas expansion, then is there any way or any policy that is, currently being duplicated? Because we have a lot of policies, and like Madam Faith said, we talk, we often do a lot of talking, we often do a lot of stakeholder engagements and what. So when we are implementing these programs, will the projects face bureaucracies? Will they face bureaucracy blocks? So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we can give, if there's anyone online that wants to ask a question, you can just type in the chat box and someone will take note of it. While the panelists are responding, we can give an open to someone online to ask. So who wants to go first? Okay. So remember my time question.
We'll get to your time question, but I just wanted to chime in quickly before NMPC comes in. So I just want to touch on the question that asked, okay, so, I think from the gentleman at the back who said, okay, now that NMPC has transitioned from what it was before and what it is now, that a lot of promises were made and what have you. I think an important point for you to note would be that prior to, say, the presidential order earlier this year, NMPC's remittances were between 400 to 700 billion per month. But however, what it is now is between 1.5 trillion to 1.8 trillion. So that's a fold of like ×2. So what that means is that it's a bottom line that goes directly to every individual in Nigeria with regards to what your FAC allocations would be. So just wanted to add that.
You see, it's very nice when someone is blowing your trumpet.
Okay, well, since I have the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting conversations, obviously, and insights shared. I think again, we've seen the journey of what NNPCL has become and what's happening in the sector. I think one maybe area that we're really under emphasizing or not focusing on is this largest ambition that Nigeria has, right? We mentioned the targets for 12 BCF, which is now in the NNPC master plan, but it was also within the gas master plan, right? There was sort of a focus to see, okay, what is unique within the NNPC gas master plan and what is different between that gas master plan. A lot of those things were re-emphasized, and that was a gas master plan that was created in 2008, understanding Nigeria's ambitions, etc. But the foundation is things really have changed. When the PIA was initially conceived 20 years ago or 25 years ago now, the ecosystem was different. The players, even competitors, were a lot less than we have now. We have a lot more competitive landscape. We have a lot of new producers coming on stream as well. And that is not even bringing in the ecosystem or the different context of energy transition, etc. Right? Somebody brought up a question about infrastructure and how Nigeria is balancing that. I think that's a critical question again for us to focus on, because you mentioned the AKK AKK pipeline, right? There's also the Morocco gas pipeline that comes up every 5 years or so when a new president, I feel like, wants to sort of talk about a landmark project, but it doesn't really move forward. And there are reasons why. This is the financing conversation we're talking about now. There are financing constraints. There are other challenges that we're not speaking about, and that's on the one hand, right? That's infrastructure. But then there's gas. If you look at, okay, what would be the ideal ingredients, right, to get the gas to work? So a business as usual or an optimal sort of context, right? We would then have to look at the power sector. We would have to get maybe new gas fired power plants. We need to get the gas from source to actually be able to transmit them. We would need to go to industry, and we would need to also get our gas there. we need to look critically at all of these different sectors. We need for CNG, we need to get new gas to power the transportation. So there's a lot of gas that we're speaking about that is required, right? And that's domestic. And then you look at the exports sort of landscape, right? A lot of our gas is likely also going to go to LNG anyway, because rather than domestic, because the pricing and everything else there is more appealing for the operators themselves, right? So it's such a very convoluted conversation. There's so many different layers and parts of it. So not a very simple and simplistic conversation, which is why I kept reiterating the need for recalibration and right sizing and what sustainability has to do with that. Even if we had again, we had this shift that you as Chinedu mentioned, from non-associated gas to associated gas to non-associated gas, right? The PIA has then helped to create a framework around that for pricing, for infrastructure, etc. But then the context has still changed, right? The point about talking about gas as a main business versus oil as a side business is saying that we have had that rhetoric, but why has it not become a main business? There's a reason for that, right? So it's really so convoluted. So it's looking at the ambitions for Nigeria is how do we, generate significant revenues and investments where we can be as buoyant as that example that gentleman gave, right? Where each of us has $300 or something to our name or more, right? What does that look like? And how do we keep our development priorities at the forefront of these decisions or conversations that we're having? Not looking at a single energy source, but looking at things more realistically, right? We have all of these different exports, domestic, etc. We could then say, since Nigeria is using gas to transition fuel, we want to use it at a particular sector. Power, maybe not necessarily, there's renewable opportunities there, etc. Maybe industry for now or something. But there is not that calibration. There is not that sort of clear focus about what we've learned over time since the 2008 gas master plan to what we see now, right? What are the differences and how do we shift things around? How do we right size our current ambitions? Because ultimately the goal is to see that Nigeria is able to move around. We're able to get power where we need it. So that is the sort of conversation, the sort of reality that I would like us to see in the plans that we have, right? Down to this is what NNPC's role then is, right? And so that clarity doesn't exist. And instead, we're constantly regurgitating ideas that have come before. And if we don't have that recalibration and that clarity, we don't know where we're going, right? And that's the work that Energy has been trying to do, is really unpack that, right? So we have this decade of gas plan. What does that mean in terms of the upstream, first of all, right? What are the bottlenecks still with the midstream and the downstream? If we're talking about power, we have all the transmission issues. How do we actually recalibrate that even for renewables to be able to uptake, to be take and fed into that ecosystem? So there's so much more that we need to unpack. And then when you've unpacked that, we can then say, what are the real finance needs, right? And how can we pursue and provide an ecosystem that enables the international community, our local community as well? We talked about the initial fireside chats, and also the presentation by Ibrahim earlier was about how do we unlock local financing, and then find local financing then knows where to go. But until we have that right-sized ambition, we can't really determine and provide that sort of landscape. And that is what in NRGI we're challenging the government and then all of us ourselves to ask, right? How do we continue to unpack this sort of myriad of, is it ghosts or should I say, clouds that we're constantly having to pull back? And until we get there where it's clear for each and every one of us, where everyone in this room can say, okay, this is what it looks like, this is what the plan was, that the lessons that have been learned, the ecosystem has changed, there are competitors now, this is where Nigeria's own slice of the pie exists. We still want to achieve our other economic priorities, and how do we address that, given the realities on ground? That, for me, doesn't exist. It would be great to sort of hear again maybe what NNPC has done. I think anybody asked that question earlier on as well, has recalibrated with that in mind, right? It's a challenging one, and I may not necessarily expect an answer because, NNPC has its brief, so, not necessarily where you want to unpack that. But these are questions I would like to have us really having answers to. Can I start having those sort of conversations? Then we can have a bit of a back and forth, right? Where do we move things around or not? But for me, I don't think that currently exists, and we need to move to that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Please round of applause for thank you. Right. I think I'll actually need to respond to I think the remaining parts of the question that have not been addressed.
Yeah, I think Tengi has addressed some parts of the question
All
already, right? So maybe to see what is left on the cards, right? Uh, so just to talk a little around the gas master plan, right? Just a bold on from Tengi's talk. So when we say, so firstly, note that NNPC is a national oil company, right? And to that extent, NNPC, it's your own company, right? And caters for the 250 million Nigerians. And thank you so much, Nick, for putting those words. Because when we hear NNPC, we only look at the oil produced and sold. But we need to realize that we pay dividends on a monthly basis, to FAC, right? And also note that NNPC is not a regulator. So because some of the conversations I hear around are things that are regulatory in nature and not commercial in nature, right? Because we have our role cut out for us. There's a role we play, right? So as a business company, there are things that we are saddled to do, right? So I'm just going to take then, let me just, and I think that's also important to support the conversation around the NNPC Gas Master Plan. If you are familiar with the 2008 Gas Master Plan, NNPC wore a cap of both regulator, operator, and everything. There were key conversations in those Gas Master Plan. Laws that needed to be made, policies that needed to be put in place, pricing mechanisms that needed to be put in place, setup of GSCN, and that's the gas aggregation company, transportation codes and all that. These are things that today, in the current NNPs cannot do. So the question will then be for NNPs, what is then your role with regards to 2008 Gas Master Plan, and how would you size that role? So if you take a look on the National Gas Master Plan of 2008, NNPC will then know that my remit does not cover XYZ, and also ABC has been done. So you would not. So you need to refresh your documents, right? So that your document speaks to current realities, right? And those current realities, you then sit from those points of those current realities to begin to address what the challenges are. I think it would have been interesting if after the PIA was passed and NNPC rules changed and NNPC did not do anything, then we could say that NNPC is not it's the same old story, right? So because I hear the story about the conversation of the every 5 years change, but because the industry changed, so we need to wear a different thinking cap. And when did this industry change? I mean, anybody who is aware of what's happening in the current NNPC governance, right? So currently we have a board that is made up of industry giants. These are guys who have run the industry at the various highest level. The NLNG guy, the MD of Seplat, the chairman of Seplat, the guys who have been directors. These are people who have run the industry. And the president, Mr. President, found that it was very important, to address the pains of Nigeria, right? To show that NNPC has that execution discipline. And that's why that has been done. That was done last year, right? Additionally, come down to the next level leadership, which is the senior management team. You also see top executives that have run industries too coming in. So the cloth you see and the NNPC you see, it's not the one you saw before, right? And like I said, the whole thing changed from the PIA. So is it the 5 years then for you to give a call to say whether we're still going to change the policy? All right, so let's take a look at also other things, right? So other key points, so maybe I just take from Dede's point, right? So around the gas expansion and the national oil company, yes. So for us, really, it's, like I said, we're commercially focused, right? And we have, we're responsive to the regulator. So if NUPRA or NMDPRA is in the house today, and they say, oh, this is what all producers in the country must do, we'll have to do that, right? Because first, we are responsive to them, and we need to respond to whatever the regulators have put on us. And at the same time, the law says we must make profits. It's written in the law. Prior to now, NNP used to get its subvention from the government, right? But following PIA, NMP, the PIA said that NMPs has to be self-funding. That alone means a lot. In fact, a lot of people have to leave NMPs because you can't bear, it's a risk, right? Because it's no longer government giving you fund anymore. But you now have to take a cap and say, okay, how do I make sure that this company stays profitable? And that's why if you then have things like the gas master plan coming in to say, how do we make sure that our projects that we're looking at are fundable, right? And that investors can trust this and put this in place. So it's not in the past where the company will want to throw away money for the sake of doing projects, but we want to do projects that are all aligned, right? And just to also say, around the gas master plan, one of the key things that comes out on the gas master plan is a coordination hub, a digital-driven coordination hub that kind of tracks all of these projects and activities to ensure that they are all aligned. So if you have some time, go take a look at the gas master plan. Okay, if you have if you can access the document, right? If you can, I can also share that with the coordinator and facilitator of this program so that you can have access to that, right? So then for every home and LPG, yes, this is something around the LPG, discussing the challenge of gas supply to rural areas, right? Yes, so one of the things we're also doing, I mean, taking off the gas to the east, taking off the gas to the north, right? These are some key big projects we are doing. But at the same time, there are also conversations around the LPG supply to homes, right? Where NMPC is also trying to run some of those activities. I know last year, the whole of last year, we did like every home a cylinder project. So we were beginning to study the market, know homes that are required these social interventions and bring them out. You know, NMPs has an NMPs Foundation. So these are some of the projects, you know, that the NMPs Foundation is looking at. But these are some things that are teeing off, right? And we need to get to those points. Then so in addition to the 250 million Nigerians conversation, where I said NMPC is your company, representing you as a national oil company, it's also important to understand that through our sustainability framework, one of the practices that sustainability helps you do is that it ensures you engage stakeholders, right? And when you engage stakeholders, you understand what is the pain point to stakeholders and begin to address that. Yes. So what we've done is that we've carried out a materiality assessment. And based off that materiality assessment, we've developed a strategy. And some of those strategies have seen gas issues that need to be addressed, you know, oil production issues that need to be addressed, asset integrity, a lot of things that need to be addressed, social issues that need to be addressed also, right? Because we've listened to stakeholders and we are working out the strategy and the path, you know, to achieve this. Then from I think Tolu's point here around the gas infrastructure while reducing emissions. Yes, remember that we are not regulators. So what it means is that before you set up facilities, the regulator comes and ensure your compliance, right? Just like fuel stations. Now, you just can't set up a filling station in the country. NMDPRA will ensure that you meet XYZ. You need to set up the depth of the tankers to be stated, the pipeline, there's the exhaust pipes, all those things had to really be put in place. So the same thing NMPs is subjected to, and all projects. So even right now, for you to do an upstream project, you need to ensure that you've showed them what your gas utilization plan, flare utilization, environmental fund, all of those things has to be in place before you even, you know, your field development plan, you know, gets approved. So an NMPC is being held to these responsibilities also, because we are not acting as a regulator one bit. We are a commercial operating company. Now, when you then talk about how do we balance profitability and responsibility, it also ties back to the licenses that has to be given, right? And we can't operate if we don't have such clearance from the regulator. So, and like I always said, anybody who is in the industry tries to be a reasonable and prudent operator, and it's the onus is on the regulator to shut down facilities that are not compliant with such regulations. So we will do our part. Regulators will do their part, right? So, and I think these questions help to really size the roles of NMPC versus the regulator, because probably in the past you have conversations of NMPs and we will answer everything, but no. I'm here for business. The regulator has his part, but I'm a reasonable and prudent operator. If you feel that I'm not doing the right thing that needs to be done, get the regulator's notification, right? Notify the regulator. So then the regulator can come and then shut down the facility. And has that been happening? Yes, it's been happening. Wherever, I mean, not just NMP's facilities, right? Where there are facilities that are not meeting regulatory requirements, those facilities, you know, and get shut down. Yeah. So I think coming back to the conversations in the Korea, then so around methane, balancing methane emissions and flare out conversations. I think I must really commend the NUPRC and NMDPRA. I know the whole of last week we spent engaging all our upstream operating companies around methane, looking at what their methane management plans are. And also good to point out that NUPRC and NMDP are also signed up to the OGMP. So OGMP means the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership. And what it then means is that it's expected that you meet a certain quality, right, in how you manage your methane. And also to say that NNPC also is a signatory to the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership. An interesting thing to say is that we're already working, so that methane partnership, there's what you call a level 5, which is a gold standard. When you hit that level 5, it means that you're able to measure reports clearly, verify, and you can measure down to the least source of where your methane is coming. And I would say that all NNPC's operated assets are actually at the level 3 right now. And what are the key things that now takes you to a level 5? It means that you have an external, so like a drone or whatever it is, to now begin to confirm whether what is reported from your asset or based on estimation meets really what the external measurement device is saying. And this year alone, NNPC, has gone ahead to, we've carried out some methane drone measurements. We are using OSIA technology. OSIA technology is a drone technology by Total Energies, right? Where we measure and look out for methane emissions, and we address them. NNPC also is signed up to the United Nations Environmental Program, International Methane Emission Observatory. What that does, so they have this methane alerts and response system. What that does is that from the satellite, they can show you where you have a high methane, on your facilities. And then you're given a time to respond to those methane alerts that they have notified you. And I'll tell you that every of the alerts we have received, right? This is even on like global record, right? We have all responded to those methane alerts, right? And that is to say, I mean, when I say we have responded, we've not say, oh, we know there's a methane here. No, we have addressed those methane issues and we have gotten a clean bill of health, right? Don't forget also, because we are also a commercially driven company and we're good out there to raise money. We receive a lot of requests from like JP Morgan and some big banks, right? To say before we can give you this money, we're carrying out a due diligence on you. And that due diligence requires you to address these issues that were raised in the public space, not by NNPC. So, and these are newspaper issues that were raised. Then we begin to show the proof, because for this is an audit process, like they want to see proof of how you address these issues. So we will keep improving on that. And just to also say that we also signatory, we have a human rights policy, and that human rights policy, it's addressing things around the social integration she was talking about, right? So how we relate with the environment. And he said, okay, yeah, because I know you ran now. So but lots of questions, right? So I'm just going to pick up like key ones just to, so that when you leave here, you're happy with NNPC, right? So so the ones that will not, the other ones, I'll leave them when we can always engage, right? So
Right.
yeah, so let me just, and I think just to the questions you now asked, right, around how we're ensuring investment attraction beyond setting. We're looking at timeline, right?
Yes.
So, and I know this conversation is coming from the 2023 UNFCCC resolution of transition away from fossil fuel. That's where that conversation is coming from. That 2023 did not consider Strait of Hormuz. Because, I mean, I was speaking this year, we set up a joint decarbonization working group for the whole industry. GECF is a gas exporting country of federation. There was this pressure that, oh, the EU regulations is coming, we need to do something. Only for last month for EU to deflate all our tires to say, sorry, we are slowing down on all of these things. Right? So it means that there's a reality in the market. These needs are real. Right? So, and because these needs are real, it means that investments needs to still be catered for. And so when you also look at it, OPEC, even as of last year and this year, has also demonstrated that there's a 50-year need for oil and gas in the market, right? So, and what I was expecting that when the Strait of Hormuz happened and then fuel prices rose to 1,005, that everybody was going to abandon their car, right? And then everybody was going to go on solar, and everybody was going to go, go on EV, right? But there's a reality in the market. So those ends needs to still be bottlenecked, really. But while we are going to those points to bottleneck them, how do we ensure energy security, energy affordability for our citizens? And of course, considering the energy interdependence that we play. When I mean energy interdependence, because other countries depend on our energy. As we speak, a lot of countries are approaching, we want that Morocco gas pipeline to come up on speed so that we can get gas through Spain into Europe. These are conversations that are happening, right? But at the heart of it is how we do that, right? So one of the ways Africa has really done that is through the Africa Energy Bank. They've asked me to stop. but be rest assured, right, that we're a national oil company, and we are focused on making sure that we are your what's it called, energy company of choice, right? So that anytime you think of energy, think of NNPC. Thank you.
NNPC says that if they are seeing the future as bright. Well, thank you very much, Ledu. At least it's a slow down, not a stop. It doesn't mean that we'll not still get there. So perhaps it gives you more time to increase your standards. I think that's what I would say about that. Thank you very much. Sorry, Madam Faith. I know. Yes, I don't know if she has. I don't know if you have. Give 1 minute. If you do have maybe one last sentence to just contribute.
To respond to the my brother from the NNPC. So you know,
minute,
when you
please.
sit down with
1
NNPC
minute.
and they give you, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. 1 minute. 1 minute, please.
Okay, just 1 minute. And they give you all of these statistics. You are very happy that something is happening. I'm just that we're not just doing to work the talk. It's important that as a national oil company, we all have a stake in that national oil company. Commercialization of NNPC is good, but you shouldn't commercialize to the detriment of the people. The people shouldn't be made to pay the health, the health costs, environmental costs. People should be at the center of whatever commercialization of any entity. So that's very important for us. And I think also that this conversation should be such a conversation that we can have, more often with the people at the center of it. So thank you very much, BudgiT, for having this conversation. And I'm hoping also that women in the communities will be part of this conversation. They are not just looking at them as beneficiaries, but also people who can contribute to, building their capacities as entrepreneurs and helping to develop the society. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute my little to this conversation. Thank you.
Seconds. 30 seconds, please. I'll be counting. 30 seconds. All right.
Okay, I think what I just want to reiterate at this fora is just one little thing with regards to the power sector is the fact that the power sector is gradually becoming bankable. It's important that people know this so that investors and private people can be aware that we have a situation whereby our distribution companies are living up to expectation gradually. They are able to meet 95% of what their obligations are. It's good that this message is out there so people can be aware. Yes, that is exactly what is going on now. So yeah, I just wanted to drop that there. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So piggybacking on what our brother said back there, the more you look, the less you see. So I just want you to, as you're listening to this sort of conversation, take copious notes, right? That you can then go and interrogate. There's something that I hear, but I have context that you guys may not hear and have context. As Madam Faith said, when we hear certain things, it all looks bright and shiny, right? So similarly, use that lens, right? We have 2 reports, like I mentioned earlier on, that we shared with the cards. If you don't have those QR codes, please ask someone to share with you. That should help you to look under the hood of all the things that you've heard today. So please have a look at those. It looks at analysis of Nigeria's decade of gas, what's happening there. And then it looks at Nigeria's gas power ambitions, what the limits, opportunities, and alternatives are. So please do have a look at that. And again, back to my original point, it's about sustainability, it's about putting people at the center. And it's ensuring that Nigeria is very clear about what direction it's going into, transitioning from policy, but also providing a space for finance, and looking in between and under the hood and also between the lines. So that's what I also enjoy you to do. So we need to Exactly. Recalibrate, tweak, and also right size those ambitions. We haven't gotten clarity on that yet. So continue to ask those questions until we see the definitive pathway that Nigeria has identified for itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. We'll just take a group photograph. Please, can you put Madam Faith, Faith on the screen so that we can have a group photograph with her? All right. Thank you very much, my parents. Once again, it was a pleasure having a conversation with you. I think we have next.
All right, thank you so much. Mike, sorry. Okay, thank you so much for the panel. We're going into another panel, right? Are we tired? Are we tired? Can we stand up a bit? Please, let's stand up a little so we can stretch our arms, stretch our legs, taking a deep breath. Taking a deep breath. You can just breathe in. I can still see some people sitting down. They are not tired though. Then you breathe out. Okay. Okay. Do we want the do you have any song to play for us? Even if it's 1 minute, let them just shake their bodies. 1 minute. Okay. So there's a game called Simon Says. So I am Simon. And whatever Simon says is what you do. Do we understand the instruction? But if Simon doesn't say it, you don't do it. So Simon has to say it. Okay, so let's practice. Simon says clap. Clap. You failed. It's Simon that has to say it. So Simon says clap. Simon says sit. Stand. Some people still failed it. Simon says stand. Simon says clap. Simon says clap. So Simon says sit. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go to the next panel. Moderating this panel, we have Miss Tengi George Ikoli, Country Manager, Natural Resource Governance Institute. Please, let's be putting our hands together for them. This time around, Simon is telling you to clap. Clap, 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 clap. All right, so the panel will be on climate finance and the role of renewable energy in energy transition. On the panel, we have Teresa Tolope Benro, AUEU Action Lab, Youth Action Lab. Please, let's keep our hands clapping. I know we're tired. We're almost done. Then we have Mohammed Suyad Abdullahi, Special Advisor to the EVC CE on Renewable Energy Technology, NASENI. Let's keep our hands clapping, please. See you. Okay, sorry about that. Then we have Dr. Adeola Ijoma Eleri, Deputy Director, Energy Commission of Nigeria. Not in the house. Then we have Princess Odiaka, CEO, Cook Blue. Okay. Then please let's keep our hands clapping. And lastly, we have Kolade Kolawole, Assistant Manager, Energy Access Clean Tech Hub. Please let's keep our hands clapping. All right.
Okay, good afternoon. Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Simon has given us a bit of energy, I hope. So, thanks so much. I know again it's been a long day, and I won't keep us for too long. But we do have a very, I think, important panel to really focus in on the next session of this conversation. We talked about sort of the first stage of, we've had the initial fireside chats, giving us context on climate finance and what that portends, and then we've unpacked the gas of it all, Nigeria leveraging gas to transition fuel, and then now we're looking at climate finance more broadly and also renewable energy. Just setting a bit of context. I know it's been a bit of a long day, so what we want to focus on again or thinking about in this session is a couple of things from the context of climate finance, what Nigeria, what the global climate financial architecture is, and what the opportunities are for countries like ours. And then coming down domestic, what does that actually look like in practice in terms of raising revenues, in terms of generating finance and unlocking finance for the renewable sector? What does that actually mean in practice for those actually operating in the space? So we'll hear a little bit about that and a little bit about from the youth perspective as well. So I'm really excited about this panel, and thank you so much, my dear panelists, for joining. We have Naseni, we have Cook Blue, we have Clean Tech Hub, and then we have the representative from the youth. So starting very quickly, this session will, share hopefully emerging trends in the global energy industry, what the outlook might be for generating more revenues or investments for clean energy, what role should decentralized renewables start to play, what concrete commitments we can look forward to towards COP31. So in your responses, please share those insights as well. So I'll start from Clean Tech Hub to give us a bit of a grounding and baseline for this conversation. So what are the key challenges and opportunities you see in terms of the financing of the renewable energy initiatives? It can be anything from, utility scale or mini grids. And what viable options are you seeing in your work and your analysis around renewable energy adoption, especially scaling up for renewable energy entrepreneurs? If you can answer that question to provide us a bit of context for the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tengi. And, whenever the conversation around the role of renewable energy in Nigeria's energy transition comes up, we're always happy at Clean Technology Hub, right? So, looking at, the conversation for the past 2-3 years now has always been around financing. How do we get, connect the monies that are available, and how do we connect it to entrepreneurs, developers, or ventures in Nigeria to see how they can scale their businesses and potentially get, these solutions or products to, to the people. Now, the work we do at Clean Technology Hub is we try as much as possible to see how we bridge that gap. We help ventures and companies, startups, to see how they can access this financing, right? So over time, some of the challenges that we have seen, first of all, is the issue of bankability, right? They've flogged that issue, during the fireside, the conversation. Yeah, bankability. Most of these companies, most of these entrepreneurs, they are not ready, investment ready yet, because a lot of them have solutions, they have technology, but their balance sheets are not ready, and they've not really understood what the market is all about. So that's one challenge. Another one is a mismatch, funding mismatch, high costs. We know that, for instance, now mini grid projects are highly, capex intensive, right? And commercial banks, they are not really willing to, let go of their monies to, such projects. In fact, if they do, they come with terms that are really difficult for these ventures to, to agree to. For instance, now I think interest rate should be around maybe 20 to 30%, and the tenor is really quite short. That's between say 3 to 5 years. And we all know that mini grid projects are no long term. They need time to mature so that they can recoup their monies. So it becomes really difficult for them, right? So that is another problem. Another challenge is the FX issue, which is, we know that most solar components are being imported, right? And the fluctuation in FX, you get all of these components, in USD, and why your customers are paying in Naira. I mean, so when there's that fluctuation, when there's that gap, it shrinks the, margin profit, and, it becomes really difficult for these developers or entrepreneurs, right? So these are some of the major challenges. But of course, there are opportunities. There are opportunities. For instance, a lot has been sent around the DES project, being implemented by the REA, the funding from the World Bank, that's, I think, 750 million USD, right, to provide that kind of buffer to help them de-risk and help, bring in a lot of private capital to the tune of, I think, 1 billion USD. So that is a huge opportunity for most of these developers. We've seen what REA is doing a lot in that regard, and a lot of developers now, they are now able to implement a lot of projects because they're getting concessional, financing, those some blended financing structure to help them to implement, some of these projects. But then let me now go back to, I just quickly want to mention this because something that we're beginning to see a lot of it, the demand risk as well, affordability and demand risk. When most of these solar entrepreneurs, renewable energy, that work in the renewable energy space, particularly the mini grid, project, we realize that a lot of them, they usually have challenges in with the demand, right? Because first of all, the customers or consumers, they cannot afford it, right? And that becomes a major problem. But then we're beginning to see that RE and some other, agencies in the country and some other private sector actors are beginning to see that the productive use of energy, now in this case, productive use of renewable energy can now be used to form some kind of anchor load to generate demand, right? So that is also an opportunity with which we know that yes, RE is getting a lot of funding for that and distributing the fund. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for those points, Kolade. Yeah, I think there are certainly challenges as you've mentioned, but it's also instructive to say there are opportunities that Nigeria can also take advantage of. I think we've mentioned a couple of times already the bankability challenges, and they need to fix those. But I think an important point that you also made, beyond the fact that we have concessional financing and blended financing and the other opportunities that we can explore there, were the forex challenges around importation of these different assets. And I think it would be good to have Naseni sort of share with us then what opportunities are there to try to reduce those sort of risks in terms of what role local manufacturing and technology can play in reducing that imports dependence and reducing those sort of costs. What opportunities exist there? And for Naseni's part, what sort of assessment have you conducted in terms of domestic capacity? How are you enabling that space? Are there opportunities there, or are there challenges that you're also facing? It would be great to sort of hear, so we can move away from these sort of instances. I mean, I know, was it a couple of years last year or earlier this year when the government tried to close up sort of access to importation of solar? That was sort of a huge concern by Nigerians because we did not believe that we had that sort of infrastructure and that sort of facilities to do that. So are there opportunities now, or are there still more challenges and opportunities in that space for us?
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. So yes, certainly there are opportunities around the space, and you've seen a lot of renewable energy companies pop up. In fact, I don't think I can keep track of how many, get registered, and you see different names coming up. So certainly there are opportunities, but then that opportunity needs to be matched with, industrial capacity, and this is where Naseni, puts a lens on, right? So essentially, we have identified that, we could reduce, or rather identify key areas that we have competitive advantage on, right? So we're not, jumping on the ship, right, just like that, but then we're carefully understanding what kind of requests come from the investor angle, because really to industrialize you need investors, right? The government cannot put out, it doesn't have the resources, right, to be able to do that, right? And the manufacturing can help in reducing the cost of Nigeria's energy transition, but then also localization should not simply just be, assembling imported products, right? Should have a long-term plan on how do we now develop from the midstream, right, which is basically where we are right now in the space, to the upstream where we are able to manufacture. But then you cannot do that because of globalization, right? Globalization puts a wider lens on your competitiveness, right? So we're being very, deliberate about where we have our strongest, our competitive edge. So firstly, it will reduce foreign exposure, right? As we begin to localize, these technologies, from solar panels to batteries to other balance of systems that are required. And then it also would reduce local and supply chain disruption, because as soon as this, supply chain disruption due to war or, whatever pirate activity that is on the high sea, everything becomes threatened, and naturally goods that are in country begin to raise in value, right? Which makes things, a bit difficult to plan, right? And then thirdly, technology development can make renewable energy solutions more appropriate for Nigerian conditions, because really a lot of these technologies that we take in, we have to do modifications, right? And that modification can only be possible if we have research and development focused on these areas to be able to localize effectively, right? And that requires collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, from universities to government MDAs that are working around that area, such as Naseni, so that these products continue to evolve locally and meet our specific demands in Nigeria. And Naseni has been pushing for that, and the direction we've taken is to see how we could de-risk this investment. Recently, Naseni has has its mandate to be able to commercialize its own products, right, or prototypes that have been developed over the years, right? So now we are now participating in making commercially viable investments that would yield return, right? So with that, it means that the investors that we're getting have the full understanding that we are going to sit on the board with them, and we're going to feel every pain that there is in the industry, and we'll be able to leverage our position as a government agency, to be able to provide policy, intervention, and also influence, some of the decisions that have been made in the country, right? To give you an example, is the Nigeria First policy, which was announced sometime last year. So in response to that, Naseni had entered into an agreement with the BPP, which is the federal government body that is responsible for procurement, approvals of all federal government contracts, right? So what that means is that the federal government, as an example now, for this agreement, is to say, okay, products that are locally built should be locally sourced first, right? So anything that goes beyond that, then you have to look out, outside or elsewhere, right? So to further reinforce that, engagement, we went into one of the biggest MDA, which is REA, that Clean Tech Hub has mentioned. REA currently has $750 million plus another $250 million from AFDB. So that's a huge amount of capital that is ready to be invested into the sector. But then that should not only be for, to be thrown away and be taken out of the country, right? We want to see how we could retain that value locally, right? And then this is what would really, strengthen the industry, because if there is guaranteed demand, it means industries will be more confident to invest and expand, right? And continue to meet up with those demands. So really, Naseni is at the forefront trying to drive Nigeria's industrialization, ensuring that every stakeholder is well connected to what we're doing, and to integrate on the larger goal of industrializing Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to build on that, there was something you said about Nigeria's competitive advantage. And again, globalization obviously makes it difficult for countries to sort of invest in throughout the value chain. I think that's an important component. What have we found is Nigeria's competitive advantage in this way?
Okay, so I'll take an example, right? So we have a solar street light assembly plant in Ogun State, right, in partnership with our investor. So what we identified is that it is even more expensive now from our own partners' angle and analysis, to import finished products, right, from China, right? Because really, if you look at what is happening in China now, labor is no longer cheap, right? Is either you're able to invest in automation, which requires capital cost, right, or you get pushed out of competition, right? So we bring down knockdown components, right? Labor is relatively cheap here in the country, and get them assembled. And in fact, our partner has even looked at possibility of sending this product out of the country, right? So that is one example that I can give. Thank you.
Okay. Again, just not to continue to build that on that again, I think something else I wanted to unpack with that too is the incentive structure. You obviously need a lot of private sector to play in this space. What are the incentives that you provided that allows private sector to operate? And have you seen a shift? Has that shifted over time, or is it sort of in the same way? Do we see more private sector willing to play? And if they're not, what do you think they would be willing to have, or what do you think they would need to be able to play, or willingness to play in that space?
So first of all, and I think this is very fundamental, is transparency and trust, right? So every investor needs to be able to trust and see transparent processes, in an organization such as ours, right? So the first thing that Naseni did was to implement paperless, policy, right? So you don't need to, physically come to the office to be able to get things done, right? And to do that, we set up our partnership framework, which is online. It means you could just go online and see our framework for partnerships, and you have an independent body behind that to assess, every proposal that comes in and give recommendation for further processing, right? So that is one part, and I believe this was very important to our investors that felt confident to deal with us, because if they could not determine or have a bird's eye view of what's really going on, it kind of deteriorates the confidence that they may have, even if it's the chief executive that they know, right? But then the process would make that difficult to achieve. So that is one area that Nasani implemented that gave it a very strong position for attracting investment. And then the other thing is Nasani does not just say, okay, come, we'll just give you land and then we invest. No, we sit on the board, right? We co-invest. We are with every investor throughout the way, right? So if there is a particular challenge that has to do with policy, and in the country sometimes or most times is who you know, right? And Nasani can, if you have, say for instance now, an approval pending in DPR, I'm sure the EVC can find someone that you can call to fast track that, process. So that goes in different government regulatory bodies. These are some of the challenges that investors face when they bring in their capital to invest in the country. And Nasani is pushing to see that those bottlenecks are not a problem, anymore, and we hope that is replicated across the entire country, because the country has to be investable for us to prosper.
Okay, no, fair enough. Thank you. Please give him a hand. I'm not sure you gave a hand to Kalade at the time, so apologies. Please give Kalade a late hand, a catch-up hand. Okay. I mean, throwing DPR is also old. Now we have NUPRC and NNPRA.
My apologies.
And all the ways have changed according to NNPCL.
Absolutely.
all things have passed away.
Unfortunately, it's like calling
become
NEPA
new.
AEDs.
No, so
NEPA.
I'm just saying fair enough. No, fair enough. So again, those things that you were saying have changed. So now across the board, everyone is up and doing, as they say. It was important to unpack that again because we have Princess from Cook Blue, who has been traversing what it means, for Nigeria to actually, for a Nigerian to try to start a business, in the renewable energy space. She's faced the challenges that Claudia has mentioned and Naseni as well. So yeah, if you can tell us a little bit about your business, the journey there, and whether truly things are as transparent and as clear, as we've heard that they might be, and the other challenge that you've faced to see really the story of, if we actually want to get renewables to scale, get investors to invest in businesses, what has that experience been for you?
Okay, thank you, Nengi.
No, thank
you, Raja.
Goodness.
Thank you. Okay, so hi everyone again. Thank you for the opportunity. The thing is that starting a business in Nigeria is like wishing to probably travel to the moon. By the time you enter the bus from your bus stop, you just end up in the next bus stop, right? But again, it all depends on what is pushing you. Is it the passion? Are you there for? I mean, what are you doing the business for? So apparently, I'm the CEO, Trifinity Intelligence Consult Limited, and our product is actually Cook Blue. So Cook Blue is a mobile application that delivers gas as a service to households and businesses in Nigeria. We started with LPG because apparently, I'm going to probably start with this question for the women here. How many of us cook with gas? Please, a show of hands. Beautiful. And I believe your gas must have finished at the middle of Sunday night or probably Saturday night. And I can imagine, especially probably your husband came in and he's very hungry and the gas finished. The story will change. Are we together? And so it means that there's a gap, right? And you now see that some women that live in houses like duplex still cook with firewood and even charcoal. True or false? Yes, they do, right? And so one of the things Cook Blue does, right? So we have this smart canister made with composite plastic cylinder, right? And so our mobile application helps you to understand your gas readings and all that. You know the level, you know the temperature. It doesn't need to explode probably on you and all that, right? And then you know how many days it's going to stay before it exhausts, right? But before it exhausts, it gives you the alerts so that you just reschedule with us and then we come and give you a free doorstep delivery, right?
Sorry, Princess, just quickly. Can you also adapt that to the renewable energy solution as well? Because the renewable panel, so I think there's people confused.
No, they're not. I'm coming to that.
Okay,
right?
a little bit.
And so apparently that's actually where we are started, right? And today we are currently doing our proof of concept in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. But I'm going to give you a reason why we started with LPG, because that was the lowest hanging fruit for us to prove to investors that renewable energy is very important in Nigeria, and they need to allow the households adopt it the way they want to adopt it, right? I give you another example. So a few years back, Nigeria missed out in a GECO meeting, right? But again, when they reached out to us, we enabled them to join the global coalition of electric cooking, right? And so that means that we were able to unlock funding from the FCDU for Nigeria, for the country. And if you notice now, that a lot of electric cooking conversations are happening because we enabled that. So it means that Cook Blue is not just adopting LPG. Cook Blue is going to be putting electric cooking on the app shortly. Are we together? And so another thing I also wanted to put in is this. Now, during our processes of getting regulations done, getting ourselves set up and all that. It wasn't easy. But I'm going to say something. You know, sometimes we businesses, when we apply for funding, we apply for fellowship, we apply for, sometimes, unfortunately, some CEOs miss it out, right? They think it's the money. The first investment we got, they wanted to give us the money. We told them, no, give me the technical assistance, because I knew what it meant. 7-Up Bottling Company gave us the technical assistance. We rejected the fund. Today, they are still with us. So it's one thing to desire to start a business, but it's another to have the, sense to go around it. Are we together? And so another thing I also wanted to put out is this, right? It's not all investment, it's not all funds that are your funds as a business person, as an entrepreneur. It's not all partners, it's not all investors that are your partners, right? You must ensure that they align. If they don't align, they will either kill your business and get you into debt. I recall when we were pitching, REA has funded us. I have to mention that. And also, let me say this, because I'm here because of BudgiT. BudgiT publish what you pay. They funded, we are part of their fellowship, and they taught us how to do survey, professional and all that. That helped us in our processes, because we were able to scale our baseline survey to over 3,000 respondents, right? And so these are these little activities around, getting funding, trying to drive your business and all that. You need all those networks, you need those fellowships, and you need to be serious within those fellowships. Are we together? When you're funding, when you're pitching, you listen to the investor. If the investor is not aligned, you move away. But don't force an investor to invest in your business. It's not done that way. I've also met people that, in fact, let me be very practical. Invest heard about our project. They met us. They said, Princess, we are not doing LPG, we are doing electric cooking. I say, I'm very much aware. You know what they said? They said, if your LPG business is successful, we will come for the electric cooking. We have a lot of partners like AFDB, aligned, pipes, just monitoring the business, monitoring the project like that. But again, when it comes to regulation, this is where I have an issue with some of our regulatory procedures. I remember we were talking about gas policy. I remember we were talking about a lot of policies that are not working. Some of the policies that we have are not translated for businesses to use to attract investors. Because sometimes, again, I'll give you an example. When we were about clearing our goods and all that, can you believe that Sun typically changed the entire policy? And it became a very big problem for the project. And what we did, but because again we have network, right? We had REA, we had UNIDO, we had the West African Clean Cooking Fund behind us, backing us. So they had to put in a step. They had to come in and weigh and say, please, this project must survive. So sometimes again, the policies around or the regulations are not smiling. But again, one of the things I also want to commend SON, commend Nigeria, is that commend customs. As, to be honest with you, these guys are very serious with their job, and they don't allow other countries demean what we Nigerians have brought on board. It's not as if the policies are bad and all that, but sometimes again, to enable the entrepreneur understand how to start applying those regulations, then becomes an issue. Sometimes again, we entrepreneurs don't even have enough money to be compliant. So you ask yourself, where am I going to get this funding from, right? So all these challenges came up, and we've been able to scale through. And today, we're actually working with the World Liquid Gas, to scale a lot of our clean cooking demonstrations, awareness, adoptions, and all that, right? We are also working with the West African Clean Cooking Fund to deepen the use of clean cooking within the urban areas. And I must say that, we just finished having a conversation with Paint Foundation, right, to see how we could deepen the use of clean cooking in Port Harcourt, right? So in all, right, it's not I can tell the story because I survived it, right? But another person might not tell that story, because it is a little bit hard, truly. The environment for doing business or starting business in Nigeria it's not really favorable.
Okay. I mean, I was gonna have a different summary. Please give Princess a hand before she made that last intervention. You know, I was gonna say from everything that Princess had said, I was about to leave my job and start become an entrepreneur. From what she shared, it seems there is funding. She mentioned a number of different funders, both global, international, and local, that are interested in providing investments for these sorts of renewable energy projects, but that there are other things that you need to also do. So I think technical assistance is one. It seems that there's a huge gap and in knowledge. So perhaps something that Seni can also take into on board, and providing those sort of insights, you know, that might seem very minute potentially, and that would help to sort of make doing business a lot easier. Perhaps things like packets that can let people know what the regulations are anyway. I mean, for those of us that work in the policy space, it's very easy to figure out and track what policies are relevant. But for the business person that's trying to, you know, come into this space, I can imagine how challenging that can be. So very, very interesting insights. I would encourage anyone that has any business, you know, leanings to talk to Princess, because she seems like she's learned quite a few things along those lines. But I think again, she points out, I think something really encouraging, because this is about finance, right? So it seems the finance is there, just need to find ways to provide the capacity and knowledge to those that are interested in doing these businesses on the fundamentals that can allow them to access that finance, and do it in a way that's beneficial for themselves and their companies. She shared a lesson about, rather than seeking any kind of funding, also to be very particular about the funding that you can access, given for potentially your identity for your business and sustainability of what you're trying to do as well. So thanks so much, Princess, for sharing those insights. Then I'll turn over to Tolu to share the, oh, thank you, to share the experience from the youth perspective. You have done a lot of work across Africa, engaging with youth, providing spaces for innovation, and support for youth as well. So I'm wondering, within this space, what sort of opportunities are there for the youth? Are there opportunities? Are the youth able to access those opportunities? We talk a lot about innovation. We talk a lot about, you know, the need to innovate, but also to ensure that there's inclusion in our renewable energy space. Do you see that as a positive right now? Do we have that landscape? Are there gaps within that? And then if there are gaps, what do we need to do to also bridge those gaps as well, in terms of accessing finance and just playing in the renewable value chain in general?
Thank you very much for that question. The Nigeria's Energy Transition Plan speaks about empowering people, young people, with over 840,000 jobs. And I would say, from a skills and beneficiary perspective, young people are significantly included across solar installation, as software engineers, as climate entrepreneurs. And there's also data to show that many entrepreneurs do not, or businesses do not, survive after the early stage. So I think Princess is one of the very few exceptions, and that should be commended. However, something I would say is, I think our perception of young people affects the kind of programs that we create for young people. And like we have heard in majority of the sessions today, capital is available. However, the major problem is the question of access. And then when it comes to the renewable energy sector, it's a lot more capital intensive than any other sector or industry. And for young people, there's the dilemma of experience to get experience. So how do you, navigate that nuance and bridge that gap? I think one thing I would share as a successful case study from my work on the EU Youth Action Lab is the program, or the project, is a $7 million project that has been running for 2 years and will run for 2 more years. And there's a way we diversify the funding. So we have 4 different lots, ranging from about 5,000 euros to up to 50,000 euros. And we've regranted to over 100 youth-led organizations in Africa and in Europe. And something I would also mention that is really commendable, because when we have these conversations around job and employment, we often think about skills and competencies. There was also a research that the African Youth Climate Action Plan did in 2023 under Yongo, and it was a continental-wide research. And from the research, young people who filled it in different languages said they had up to 5 skills, but there was a problem of availability of jobs. Last week, I was at the Netherlands Consulate for International Youth Day, and a report launched by the Youth Advisory Committee for the Netherlands Consulate showed that about 84% of young people who wanted to migrate from Nigeria will remain in Nigeria if there are credible jobs. And many of them even rated job safety over human security, which I found to be really crazy and contradictory. So when it comes to skills, holistically, young people may not have all the skills across the value chain. So you could find a young person who is technically competent but lacks soft skills. You could find a young person who has the soft skills but lacks the technical competency. And I would say creating holistic programs that address or make room for young people to grow is really important. The kind of programs an 18-year-old person might have the technical capacity and intellectual capacity to engage with in terms of renewable energy might be entirely different from that a 25 or a 26-year-old may be able to engage in. I think something else I will also share in terms of financing is there's the need to explore more collaborative financing sources. I know over the past years, society has become quite individualistic, and there's the need to come back to being a community in our approach. A case study is one of Nigeria's Forbes 30 under 30 organizations from 2025, the Youth Sustainable Development Network, and they were able to pull 50,000 USD as young people aged under 30 by forming a consortium of 3 organizations. So when it comes to financing internally in Nigeria, I think the question is what kind of local support has these systems in place that makes it accessible for young people to want to be engaged. When it comes to, I would say, the supply or the interest, the interest is not a problem. Young people are very much interested, looking for jobs. I'm sure there are people here who came here because they think they want to talk to someone, to pitch to someone, to get a job, to get an opportunity. And the opportunities themselves are quite limited. So I would say I think there's a need to expand more of these opportunities. In relation to solar, I would speak briefly on that. The criterias exist, but not many young people are aware that they exist. And even after going through the hurdles, I had to register a business this year, and it's been a lot. And my business is not necessarily technically renewable energy solely. So it's the financial requirements, like it's been a whole lot. So when it comes to having the criterias, I think what incentives are we putting in place to support young people and also to build trust? So if I have the necessary registration and I come to be a mini grid developer, am I going to be trusted enough with my certification, or do I still need to have some network backing and lobby and lobby and lobby before I eventually get that support? Also, speaking about renewable energy, I would say something that young people are also really exploring in Nigeria is wind energy, and there's the need for more support in that. Of course, it can be quite difficult to invest in those kind of areas at the moment, because as much as investors invest, some investors invest in the entrepreneur, some investors invest in the business ideas, some investors invest in the business. It's quite nuanced, right? But something I would say is we need to leverage research more. There is always the conversation around bankability, and I'm not against bankability. However, there's a way we put pressure on young people to make money, and it becomes scary, because if I want to do something and this is my first business, I need the loan, I need the collateral. Am I going to put my parents' house up for grabs because I want to show that my business is bankable? So we need to create room and opportunities for young people to grow, right? But also to make impact. And I think finally I will speak on ownership. So when it comes to the policy, but also the programs and implementation, we need to get to a point where we first recognize youth agency as human agency and not basically an inclusion gimmick because somebody is going to tick a box if young people are not there. That's something we need to recognize, because when we recognize them, it becomes easier to see the contribution that we bring as something that is technical and not necessarily as a token. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, I think that's very important. Yeah, it's sort of at some point you always have sort of like where the youth, not just the youth, but the women, communities, things like that, and it ends up being more tokenistic than actually valuable. So I think that's a very good point that you make. Essentially, we've had so much time spent already, but really great insights, I think, from our panelists. Open up the floor now to get insights from anyone else on the floor. Perhaps it could be an opportunity or response to what Princess has shared, or similar sort of concerns that you want to raise based on what you've heard today. Or it could be questions from Naseni, etc. Or maybe a quick intervention if you work in this space and there's something that has not been shared that you think is important to contribute. That would be helpful. So if you can just indicate by raising your hands. We have the gentleman over there. Any other insights or questions? Do we have anyone? We do? Okay. I didn't. Okay, note that. Okay. Anyone online as well? Is anyone online? Any questions online or comments or insights to share? Okay.
Good afternoon,
ahead, sir.
everyone, and thank you very much for putting this together at this time. I want to announce that the NMDPRA has been in the room. Thanks to the NNPC rep for trying to provide insights to the new structure of what the energy space is. So we exist to regulate the midstream and downstream petroleum operations. And so far, what the PIA has done is to actually bat new perception in terms of regulations. This has largely changed from the stick wielding regulator to an investment enabler. So bottom line, providing a regulatory clarity within the space that makes it easy for investments to thrive and of course the industry to expand. That we have done over the last 5 years brilliantly, let me put it at that. Now, regarding energy transition and the theme of this dialogue, financing energy future. Well, dwelling on the fossil energy angle, and of course, recognizing natural gas as the transition fuel. We have done so much getting to our targets, and of course, with that, we make commitments to sustainability. That has been mentioned, some of that has been mentioned. Well, part of this sustainability commitments around not too long to be launched the E10 blended petrol, which brings huge opportunity for reduction in methane emissions and of course increase in NDCs. So back to the issue of financing, we must approach this concurrently. Transition, meeting our energy needs, avoiding that aspect of energy poverty. For now, we must focus on energy, on scalable perspective, issues of production, industrialization, not necessarily primary home consumption. Where are we at the moment, and where do we hope to be? Do the resources meet this present demand at the moment in terms of renewables? So I think consideration based on that must be made. So we have provided clarity to develop and accelerate utilization of our natural resources to meet our energy needs. And of course, while making commitments towards the transition target. Financing, of course, we need to be more creative in terms of our approach to providing financing for renewables and, of course, what our set targets are. First of all, there is difficulty in accessing finance across board So what needs to be done here, of course, is to be more creative and innovative by evolving strategies that seeks to mobilize the financing industry, for example, creating an ecosystem that understands the basic requirements for financing this project in terms of numbers and whatever commercial requirements are involved. Once that is done, we have a steady project pipeline that seeks to vet, review, and provide guidance for such to scale through and meet those financial requirements. This is partly what we have been doing on the other side, creating awareness and bringing stakeholders together to create that one-stop shop that provide access to financing. So
Okay.
catalytic funding, equity finance, I think we could draw from the large chunk of intervention funds that are available within the public space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that intervention. Good to have NMDPRA in the room, and NNPCL, even though they've transitioned, as they say, tried to hold a bit of a brief for NMDPRA. So thanks for setting the landscape for what's been going on in the NMDPRA in this space as well. So thank you. We had another hand somewhere. Okay, RGN, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I want to salute everyone that just spoken. I'm particularly interested about the last speaker and talking about the youth. When I was giving our goodwill message the other time, I talked about we need to look at human infrastructure. And when we are talking about human infrastructure, we are actually referring to the youth. If Africans want to have it right, we must invest in the youth. And I think when the last speaker, one of the panelists was talking, I think he talked about the various places where the youth could benefit seriously from the energy transition program. We have many of them, and it seems we are just waiting. Though I'm from the academics. Academics has a serious role to play. And I think for some of us, the partners, there are things we could do, engaging the academics, and we can collaborate with various vice chancellors, even when we have those students, when they are still on campus, to bring them together and let them brainstorm. When we give them when we build them, we train them, and let them brainstorm in various areas, installation, software, in fact, in various capacities, so that by the time we are investing seriously in this sector, they are the ones that will drive, not bringing people outside to drive. And I want to salute Princess. What you have done, or what you are still doing, is very important. And I know there are many people that could go into this when they have the right opportunities. Not everybody could be as fearless as you are. But I think when we build them, and as much as possible, train them, catching them young, the youth, they are there. Even those who are not in the university, the artisans, we can bring them together and work on them and let them drive this with just little opportunity that we give to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those were all the hands. There any hand online? Oh, there's a line. Okay, there's a hand. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to see the hand or not.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Zoeji. I work with the REA. I just want to make a comment based on Ms. Teresa's note on young people, and also the last speaker on young people and giving incentives for them to come into the Nigerian energy transition. So under the REA, we have programs such as the Next Gen RESCO, which is the next generation renewable energy service companies, where we allow youth to apply and join in on like understanding how mini grid projects work, how renewable energy projects work, And after that, they are then embedded within renewable energy companies. So they are on paid internships. So they gain that experience that they need to actually make valuable contributions to the energy transition. And then also under the energizing education programs, which we've done phase 1, 2, and 3 of, and phase 4 is also coming up. Agreements have been signed on that. We have the female STEM internship program. That's the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where again, we allow the institutions that we have deployed these captive power plants at to nominate students, female students, to sort of balance that gender gap that we have noticed in the industry, so that they know that there is a place for them in renewable energy projects in the sector as a whole, and many other youth projects that keep coming up that we keep putting thoughts into. We have JESIP, which Princess is a beneficiary of. So things like this keep coming up so that youths can make useful contributions to this transition, and also so that at the point when they are planning to start something of their own, like becoming developers of their own, they have that experience that they need, and they are not just newcomers in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That's a very practical sort of options for the youth to also participate in. And I hope that we can take that on and also share that with others as well, because very valuable information to have. So I think with that, we have all the questions. There were no questions online. So I think we can go back to the panelists very quickly and have just one sentence or one point each that you want everyone to take away in terms of the renewable climate finance options around scaling energy from your perspective. So youth and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think as much.
Actually, maybe I think I actually want to start back from my. Sorry, I want to start back the same way that so we can end and I can take the mic and run away with it. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for me, if we are going to ensure that Nigeria achieves not just the energy transition but net zero by 2060, I think everybody has to play a very strong role. Whether you are an investor, whether you are an entrepreneur, are you a government person, are you developing policies? Be sure that your policies are that you don't develop it in silo. Be sure that those private sectors, those entrepreneurs, those businesses are part of the policy development, right? But
one
again,
sentence, 1 minute.
Yeah. But again, I mean, be sure that the banks, are aligned with that policy to ensure that that policy translates to enabling environment for people to really access the funds and all that. So please, let's all go play some role and let's get Nigeria straight to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we leave here, everybody, go find a role.
So I think what I want everyone to leave here with regards to what Nasani is doing is Nasani is currently building, right? And we need all the support that we can get. Thank you very much.
I know quick, but what support? You can say what the support is. Really.
Yeah, of course. So so we want Nigerians to build the industries, right? So we're not only just building industries with international investment and kicking everyone out, right? We're very intentional about that. We have several programs similar to what the lady from REA just mentioned. We have the Future Makers, which target children from as low as 7 years old all the way to the largest, innovation program in the whole of West Africa, which seeks to reward about 100 million naira in the grand prize, right? So we are very deliberate about that. We have a system that is transparent, that is online. Practically wherever you are within the country, you could participate, and you do not really need to know anybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So go to Nasani website, 100 million naira up for grabs.
All right. Okay. So what I'd like to say is, the government should continue to do more around de-risking the environment. Right. There's a lot of money in place. Yeah, we know, but they should do more. And I'm just going to call out CSOs and maybe RESCOs and other organizations in the room. Please let's try as much as possible to do a lot of awareness, capacity building, to ensure that young entrepreneurs in the renewable energy space, they have, what they need to be able to access this funding because they are available actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Clean Tech Hub has volunteered to train all of us in the foundations that we need around renewable financing. Okay, thank you.
All right. So my closing remark is that the success in our energy transition plan and our successful adoption of renewables is in the way we invest in young people. So train young people, invest in young people, pay young people, empower young people, and trust young people. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I want to thank my distinguished panelists for their insights, very concise contributions, and also thank the audience for those contributions that you made as well, and everyone for being here. So please give everyone yourselves a hand as well as my panelists. Thank you. Okay, we'll have a quick picture session and then we'll close. Yes.
Please let's keep clapping for them. Let's keep clapping for them. Our clap is tired. I know we're tired, but let us not show that we're tired. Thank you so much. We have been a very, very wonderful audience. And thank you so much for those who have contributed to the conversation, whether the panelists, the fireside chats, the audience. We say a very big thank you. We're wrapping up. And I will be calling on the EA to our Global Director, BudgiT Foundation, in person of Chris Uba, to come and give us the communique. And we will then afterwards take our closing remarks from our country director, Mr. Vahyala Kwaga. He opened and he will close for us. Thank you, peace.
Thank you very much, Dami, for that warm welcome. Okay, thank you to everyone that has stayed till the end. It has been a very swell time. We've had critical conversations at different points, from the keynote speech to the fireside chat to the panel sessions. We've had very, very interesting conversations. And this is a working document, and we'll share the complete communique with the email addresses that you provided. Okay. So these are some of the recommendations and key takeaways and next steps that we've gotten so far from this summit or this discussion. Okay, we gathered here today to discuss or to have a discussion on what it would take to actually close the gap between Nigeria's energy policy commitments and the money being invested to deliver them. And these are some of the key takeaways that we've gotten so far. One, we have to build a transparent pipeline of bankable projects. And number two, we have to use public and concessional finance strategically. Three, we have to deepen domestic finance. I'm just doing a summary, but the proper communique will be shared with us. And number four, we have to establish a stable and coordinated policy environment. Five, we have to make the energy transition inclusive. Of course, investments should be able to reach rural communities and SMEs. Six, we should have suitable investment structures and stronger collaborations between the federal government, the states, the banks, the private sector, and development partners. Number seven, the entire gas value chain must be developed together. Producing gas without adequate infrastructure, markets, and off-takers can bring risk. Yeah, can bring risk, which can also create stranded investments. The next one is, environmental and social safeguards. I think one of the panelists just mentioned that. Environmental and social safeguards must be central to gas expansion. Methane emissions, flaring, and community impact cannot be treated as secondary concerns when we have this in our minds. Okay. The next is the ultimate measure of success should be what Nigerians gain from this transition. It's not just about what we think we want to do. Is it reliable electricity? Is it affordable energy, jobs, and the likes? And the last year on my list, like I said, is a rough work. I may have missed out some points, but to be sent, is we should, of course, what the last panelist mentioned, we should invest in young people, train, empower, and trust young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peace. I didn't want to let our compare have to come up here to transition. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. Thank you, first of all, to our government participants who took out the time. Many of them were even here before the event commenced. And it's very pleasing to us that you take this as seriously as we do. And it shows us that you truly are our collaborators. The successes that we want to see will benefit all Nigerians. I also want to thank our CSO collaborators as well, who have been with us since day one. It's always pleasing to see you in the room and to know that you have our backs, so to speak. This journey cannot be done well if one does not go with his compatriots. And to our media and journalism folks, thank you so much for your support, for being in the room, for carrying on this message, and for creating the reality that really is what people see and hear on TV and the radio. And if I did not mention you, thank you so much for your presence and for your time. A lot has been said here today, a lot of technical things, a lot of advocacy points, a lot of innovative ideas, but I'd like us to take one thing, whatever that one thing is, and try to reproduce it or see it or tell someone else so that this conversation can continue. I remain Vahela Kwaga, and on behalf of the BudgiT Foundation and my colleagues, I thank you very warmly. And now I will call up Damilola for any final housekeeping comments before we leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kwaga. Please, let's put our hands together for ourselves one more time. We're clapping for ourselves now. All right. Thank you so much. Please, Simon says you should clap for me. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll just say, please come in for lunch. Lunch is being served outside, just where we had the tea break. And definitely all information that was shared today through the communique, publications, and all of that will be shared. I know Tengi had mentioned some QR codes. They will also be shared with each and every one of you. Once again, we say thank you and have a lovely day.